Hello and welcome to Read. Today I want to talk about Wittgenstein's Mistress by David Markson. This is the second Markson book that I have read. I did manage to get my hands on Reader's Block, and I read that and had a really amazing kind of profound experience reading it, and I hope I kind of conveyed that in the video that I made of it, and I am really happy to confirm that for me at least, David Markson has just hit two home runs in both of his works in terms of creating immensely profound, powerful literary experiences, and I kind of like both of them for different reasons, but I will, and actually in talking about Wittgenstein's Mistress, I will mention some similarities with Reader's Block, but I do want to talk about spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, just maybe leave the video knowing full well that I absolutely loved and adored this book and cannot recommend it enough, and to just go in blind. My parting words, I guess, would also just be to try and read it, if it works out with your schedule, to try and read it in a short time frame. The idea or the premise of Wittgenstein's Mistress is, reading from the blurb, it is a story of a woman who is convinced and may ultimately convince the reader that she's the only person left on Earth. So our main character is named Kate, and it's really unclear whether people literally aren't there anymore, whether there's literally no one else, although there is some evidence to say that it is kind of true that people are literally gone. But the idea or the premise of her story is that for about 10 years, it has been about 10 years since this calamity occurred, and at first she went around looking for people. She traveled the earth trying to find people, and in the beginning sometimes she left messages in the street. She spent some time living in museums, which I think is very aligns with David Markson, especially with Reader's Block, in that something Stephen Moore talks about in the afterword of this is how with Markson's characters, their kind of dialogue or their way of communicating with people is with culture, and so it was a really sort of touching thing to read about Kate spending these times in these museums, and especially museums that I myself had been to, but where we're at now in terms of present day is that Kate is now living on a beach. She's living in a beach house, and she's doing just the kind of basic daily things to stay alive, but she sits down and she starts to sit at a typewriter and starts to write the story of this book, and that kind of occurs, you kind of find out that that's happening near the end, that it's actually a literal thing being typed, but not really actually. You get introduced pretty quickly that now she's taken a break in writing, but she didn't necessarily let you know. My thoughts, oh my gosh, so my thoughts for this book are so this book, it is all over the place and it is fragmented, and to just address the elephant in the room in terms of the title, Wittgenstein's Mistress, it is very much based off the Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, and that's all I'm going to say on that, because to be honest, I have read the Tractatus, and by read I mean looked at every word, because by the end I was convinced that someone actually gave me a Latin translation, because I didn't understand anything about that. In the time since, I've gone to try and learn more about logical or rational atomism and the picture theory, and it's stuff that I think I know, I think I get it, and the world is a composition of facts, not of things, but I'm not even gonna I'm just gonna go ahead and just not even pretend that I've made the connections that Markson maybe would like me to make, and yet still I have just unending praise for this book. So the topics that I want to talk about is 1, the use of menstruation in the book, 2, the intertextuality and the references, and some other kind of just various anecdotes, which hopefully I'll remember to come around to. But the reason I want to start with menstruation actually is because that is one of the... It can come across a bit jarring in the book, especially because, Markson, being a male writer, is writing a female character, and one of the criticisms that I have seen leveled at him is, why are we spending so much time talking about menstruation, and that people believed it was just like, oh, a male character writing a female character, or what do females do? They menstruate. Well, I may as well write that in the book, which is just like, I want to say that I understand that there are male writers who have just no idea how to write female characters, and so they are like that. But I just think, like, if you spent like 2 minutes thinking about why menstruation plays such an important part in this book and why it's so explicitly mentioned, I think it's very obvious that David Markson is not the sort of person who is, like fumbling to create a female character. And so the reason why, and so even though it did start off jarring for me at first, just in the first couple of mentions, it went on, and I really started to feel like the use of menstruation became a sort of literary or a symbolic Swiss Army knife in this book, because, and really only because Kate is approaching menopause. So she's not 100% sure how old she is, but she's guessing that she's in her mid to late 40s and probably even after 50. Which, of course, is the age where, on average, women will start going through menopause. And I felt like that was a really... The reason that I said it was a Swiss Army knife was because, one, Kate, the character, makes a reference to the fact that she finds it hard to keep track of time, and she often loses track of what day it is, and even says some really charming things like, oh, it was a Tuesday. I don't know if it was a Tuesday, but it just felt like a Tuesday, because some things have Tuesday energy, which I was like, oh, that is so correct, like how Thursday is the best day of the week. But anyway, I thought that considering a lot of the book is kind of expresses or shows her slowly decaying mental stability, the fact that the sort of inbuilt timekeeping mechanism of a regular period starts to get disrupted when you go through menopause was actually, one, it kind of reintroduced this instability in terms of being able to keep track of time. And two, the most important thing is that even though it is really only kind of alluded to and it's really not focused on, we do know that Kate did have a son. We don't really know what his name is. At first it's said that it's Simon, but then it's said that it's Lucian, and so not 100% sure, but we kind of sort of know that her husband's name, or the father, was named Adam. And going through menopause, rather, I think was a kind of really tragic way of internally informing Kate that she is the last person, because she's probably now no longer able to give birth, and it's a sort of internal reinforcement or an internal understanding of an external fact that she already knows. And I wonder, one of the things that I started thinking was whether her approaching menopause sort of contributed to her not looking for people anymore, why she sort of just went to the house on the beach. And so, yeah, it was a really kind of profound use of menstruation, actually. So that was sort of what I wanted to that was the reason why I wanted to point it out, and to try and hopefully dispel criticisms to say that it's just Markson fumbling to create a female character. I wanted to talk about intertextuality because in reader's block, the kind of effect that it has is that you are just getting a slew of literature tidbits, and by the end, I had a very almost cosmic horror level of fear at the idea of learning anything, because it would just build up all of these facts, and it would maybe distract you from wanting to create your own things. And it's an effect that I really can't convey unless I think you've read the book, or if you've had a similar experience to David Markson. But in Wittgenstein's Mistress, I also had a similar experience of becoming afraid to learn things, but in particular, it was afraid to learn the truth of certain anecdotes that Kate was saying. So in Reader's Block, I pretty much assumed that every anecdote that Markson wrote was factually true, because when it lined up with the ones that I already know, I was able to confirm and just be like, okay, yeah, sure. So when he mentioned that this person was an anti-Semite, even if I didn't know that before, like, I just imagined I could go look and find out, and that would be true. In Wittgenstein's Mistress, however, one of the things that happens is that she is telling stories, she's telling anecdotes from literature, and she starts to make mistakes. And it is unclear whether or not she's aware all the time of if she's made a mistake, but near the end of the book, you see that some part of the mistake, like some parts of the mistakes, are just mixing up or having a name confused. She thinks she's hearing one song and she's kind of attached a certain name, the Alto Rhapsody, to that song, but it was actually a different song. However, as the book as the book develops, and as again her mental stability degrades, you start to see some really, really tragic examples of misinformation and miscommunication that is just absolutely gut-wrenching. And so the example that I think David Markson put in to make sure that everybody, even if they didn't have any kind of literary knowledge, would at least see, is that Kate is talking about Raskolnikov and says his full name, Rodion Raskolnikov, and I think he has a middle name, but I can't remember what it is. And then later on, she talks about the poet Rainer Maria Rilke. And so both of those names have been established. And then quite late in the book, she accidentally says Rainer Maria Raskolnikov. And as soon as you read that, it is just like, oh, your eyes start watering. It is so just heartbreaking. But as Stephen Moore points out in the afterword, there are plenty of other examples. And so the thing that I'm worrying about is, what if I go and learn all of this and I come back and read this book and I start to see that there were traces of her mental decline even earlier than what I thought. And so an example is that I knew that Lawrence of Arabia's real name was T.E. Lawrence, but I didn't know that he went by T.E. Shaw. And so in the book, when Kate is talking about T.E. Shaw fighting alongside Lawrence of Arabia, it didn't occur to me to like go and click, and it didn't even click to me until I read Stephen Moore's afterword, and I looked up, wait, who's T.E. Shaw? And it's just another name for T.E. Lawrence. And so that was another kind of glass-shattering moment, and I just imagined that my entire experience and memory of reading this book is just glasses waiting to shatter. And so, yeah, it is a very immense experience. And last thing, I guess I kind of wanted to talk about topic-wise, I don't know if I mentioned this at the start, was sort of the voice and the way that David Markson writes, and that he has what seems to be this very crystal clear ability to introduce philosophical concepts to us and to help us sort of balance them in our minds. So one of the things that I that he explores is just talking about like painting, and that the main character Kate believes that she sees in the window of a painting a character, and she gets really, really deep into it until the end. She's just like, yeah, but it's just pigments on a canvas. And she talks about constructing this studio in her head where all of these famous people have just been have appeared in Rembrandt's studio, and she's balancing this idea of everybody being equidistant to each other, which is so funny. That's another thing with the voice and the prose, that Kate is able to really charm us by having these running jokes like being equidistant. So the story of it is that she was absolutely raging when reading a Japanese speaker's manual where the speaker said, the manual said that the speakers needed to be equidistant, and she just has a whale of a time laughing at that, because any two objects that are existing in space are as far apart from each other always, and so everything is equidistant. And I don't know if everybody else got the joke, or if maybe I got it because like because I understand sort of about music and audio, but the idea is that the speakers need to be equidistant to the listener, because if they're not, then there'll be phase issues. And so it's obvious, but she's only considering those two objects in space, and then it just becomes this absolute running joke that develops and kind of goes through variations where she talks about like going to the Colosseum and imagining lions fight, like eating Christians back in the day, and that they'd be fully equidistant. They'd always be equidistant to each other, but then after the Christians are eaten by the lions, are they still technically equidistant? And then she thinks about whether the images or the characters in her brain are equidistant to her, and it is just a really, really amazing, like, kind of playful variation on these philosophical topics that I just got so much delight in. And those are the big key things I think. And then from here, maybe just some quick anecdotes. I don't know where I heard this, but one thing that I liked is that, or a theory that I liked, that you can't necessarily maybe can't confirm or deny, but that the way in which the book will establish an idea and then sort of break it apart and then go into like sub-variations, even though they're broken apart and spread out throughout the book, it kind of mirrors Wittgenstein's Tractatus, where it's just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. But if you just imagine that he took them all around and kind of mixed and jumbled them up in the book. That's a cool idea. I wanted to share a fun kind of personal anecdote. I really liked how when Kate is talking about being in museums, and she talks about going into the Borghese Museum in Rome and signing her name in a mirror, but then it turned out that she actually signed somebody else's name, and it was this whole thing. But I just wanted to share a fun anecdote that actually, when I was in the Borghese Museum and I was standing outside the woman's bathroom waiting for my sister, I had this really intense bout of deja vu, to the point that I even kind of sort of started thinking that I dreamt standing there like a year or two prior. But that was a kind of surreal experience, just to read that, and like the exact same place outside the women's toilets in the Borghese Museum. And the other thing is, I think that there are some just like really heartwarming things, and I loved that even though there is the end where Kate is starting to talk, she's kind of singing a requiem for all of the people who went crazy and went mad, but some other little things that I think don't get mentioned. I found it was really emotionally touching when she was talking about all the people that she would have liked to tell that you could drink from these rivers now, like the river Seine in Paris, because presumably now that there's no people, there's not as much pollution, and so after time you're just able to drink from it again. And that kind of informed, or maybe gave evidence for the fact that people are actually gone. I think that's pretty much it. I don't know what else I can or want to say, but I think that, like, again, Wittgenstein's Mistress was such a great, incredible read, and I am looking forward to buying and getting my hands on Markson's last 3 novels. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.